Do any of the following names sound familiar to you? Albert Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, Christopher Columbus, Jackie Robinson, Mahatma Gandhi, Leonardo da Vinci, or Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart? Well, it may be that you recognize one or more or even all of these names. But what do these individuals have in common? Well, besides being famous, they're all known for something. For instance, Columbus has been credited with discovering America. Gandhi was a religious leader who was known for partaking in a hunger strike. Da Vinci was a world-renowned artist, while Mozart was a celebrated musician and composer, and so on and so forth. These individuals made it their life's work to make their names known in the fields that they dedicated their lives to. This was very, very important to them. But the truth is that most people are concerned with how they are viewed, or rather are concerned with their reputation or the name that they make for themselves. You see, there is a measure of self-respect for many people, or even self-worth, that their name brings them when they have the admiration of other people. This is so much so that some will go to great lengths to make themselves a name at all cost. Well, this was the case with the residents of the ancient city of Babel. They were so determined to become famous that they were willing to go up against God and disobey him by creating a city and constructing a tower that would be used for false worship. Their goal, as stated in Genesis chapter 11 and verse 4, was to make a celebrated name for themselves. But they failed miserably. Their names, and the city for that matter, cannot be found anywhere. They do not exist. Why? Because they chose to go up against God. Well, in their search, or in the search to make a name for themselves, many people today dedicate their lives to a cause. Some to civil rights, others to business, others to politics, science, entertainment, sports, so on and so forth. It can be said that there are fewer things that interest humans more than their name and their reputation. However, there is some truth to that. Know what the Bible states. Let's read together Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 1. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 1 says, "A good name is to be chosen rather than great wealth. To be respected is better than silver and gold." You see, the Bible acknowledges the value of having not just any name or any reputation, but a good name, a good reputation. According to the scripture, the respect that comes with a good name is better and more valuable than silver and gold. But then again, can a name really have that much value? Well, allow me to illustrate it with this check. Let's say someone were to give you a check for $1 million just for being a good person. However, I'm sure we would all be very interested and happy to receive a check of this kind. But when we analyze the check a little closer, we notice that there are some important elements that are missing. First, the person who gave us the check hasn't signed it. And secondly, and probably just or even more important, your name is not on that check. You see, if the person that gave us the check hasn't signed it and your name is not on that check, this check would be absolutely worthless. In a case like this, your name could be worth $1 million. Now, a good name or a good reputation, well, this is worth more than $1 million. It's worth more than silver and gold. How's this so? Well, we'll answer that question throughout our discussion today. But it's important that we answer 3 burning questions in our discussion. First, what kind of name am I making for myself? Second, how does my name reflect on others? And lastly, is it really necessary or important for me to have a good name with God? Well, let us begin with the first question. What kind of name am I making for myself? Well, when we were born, we were all given a name. But that name was only of interest to our parents or our family members. Our name was kind of like a label or a tag, a name tag, we can say. Some similar to one we might see when we enter a place of employment and we meet someone for the first time and we see that they have a name tag. All we know about that individual is their name. Well, the same can be said about us when we were born. No one knew anything about us. They did not know what kind of person we would grow up to be, if we would have fine qualities, an outgoing personality, special skills, or if we would even be drawn to God and serve Him. Although in many cases, our parents were the ones who gave us our names, the truth is we are the ones that add meaning or define our name. However, this does not happen overnight. It takes time. But as the days go by, our name becomes more and more defined by our character. But it's good to note that this can go one of two ways. Our character, or who we are, can make for ourselves a good name, but it also can make for us a bad name. Now, at the beginning of our discussion, we mentioned a few names, and you may have been familiar with some of those names. In fact, you may even be familiar with some of their life accomplishments. And when I mentioned those names, you probably recalled these life accomplishments. But I also could have mentioned some other names that could have made you think of negative personality traits of those individuals. For instance, what comes to mind when you hear the names Napoleon Bonaparte, or Adolf Hitler, or Vlad the Impaler, or Ivan the Terrible? Likely nothing endearing. And if you don't know who the last two were, their names say it all. The Impaler and the Terrible. What's interesting is that the Bible also records the name of some individuals who made a bad name or a bad reputation for themselves. And when we hear those names, we call to mind some negative personality traits. Let's test this. What comes to mind when you hear the name Judas Iscariot? I don't know about you, but I think of a coward, a traitor, an apostate. How about the name Nimrod? Well, this man was a rebellious man, an opposer to Jehovah. How about the name Cain? Well, Cain was jealous and a wrathful murderer. What can we say about the name Adam? Well, Adam was disobedient and egotistical. In fact, he is the reason why we are in the state we are today. Now, we want to make sure we're not making that kind of name for ourselves. On the contrary, we want to make a good name for ourselves, one like many faithful servants of Jehovah made and are recorded in the Bible. Let's take Moses, for instance. Note how Jehovah himself viewed this man. Read with me, please, what's recorded here in Exodus chapter 33 and verse 17. Exodus chapter 33 and verse 17. It says, Jehovah went on to say to Moses, I will also do this thing that you request, because you have found favor in my eyes, and I know you by name. Moses certainly had a good reputation with Jehovah, hence the expression, you have found favor in my eyes. But Jehovah went beyond that. He also told Moses, I know you by name. I'm sure that Moses was thrilled. This was a powerful expression. Just imagine, the sovereign of the universe knew Moses by name. Now, can you remember a time when you've seen someone that you admire and they can't remember your name? I'm not sure if that's happened to you. I know it's happened to me. But just when you think, well, there's no way they're going to remember my name from that brief encounter we had, they suddenly call out your name. How does that make you feel? Well, it makes us feel good. In fact, we are impressed. Well, Jehovah told Moses that he knew him by name. He knew the kind of man Moses was, and Jehovah chose to remember him. Now that is impressive. Can the same be said about you and I? Has Jehovah chosen to remember your and my name? Well, the answer to that question will let us know what kind of name we are making for ourselves. Now, this takes us to the second question that we asked in the beginning. How does my name reflect on others? Well, when we make ourselves a good name with God, this also has a positive impact on others. This was the case with one of our young teenage pioneer sisters from the Philippines named Daphne Jane. Now, you may recall this experience as it was posted on jw.org, and it was also mentioned recently on one of the governing body updates that we had. Daphne Jane, although a teenager, was suffering from a deteriorating eye condition. However, this did not stop her from preaching to everyone. In fact, Daphne Jane decided one day that she was going to invite the doctor that was treating her to the memorial. However, this year the memorial did not or was not celebrated how we're normally accustomed to celebrating the memorial. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the memorial had to be streamed and many different arrangements had to be made last minute. However, this did not stop Daphne Jane from inviting her doctor. As it turns out, not only did her doctor accept the invitation to the memorial, but he invited other colleagues. There was so much interest that the congregation's conferencing system could not handle the added amount of people. Therefore, the doctor had to assist with hosting the video conference. On the day of the memorial, medical professionals, policemen, and high government officials all were linked in to the meeting. By the end of the memorial, 31,000 people had connected to the program either by video or audio. What an outstanding witness, wouldn't you say? In fact, one of the viewers expressed the following and said, "It was my first time to cry while listening to a Bible-based talk. I am very thankful to you, Daphne Jane, that you invited your doctor and that we too were included among those comforted. Now, I believe there is a God, and I thank you because my point of view was changed." What an outstanding witness. In fact, we can say that this was all possible due to the good name that Daphne Jane had. She built a good reputation with her doctor. And she would witness to him, and she would have good use of the scriptures. She would invite him to read articles on jw.org. Having a good name or a good reputation reflects well on others, on our family, on the congregation, and more importantly, on our God, Jehovah, as we can see in Daphne Jane's case. Regardless of our circumstances, we all can bring praise to Jehovah and to others by having a good name. Now let us consider how the Bible can help young ones, men, women, and parents to do this. Let's start with our dear young ones by considering an example of a young person who had an outstanding name or an outstanding reputation. The account is recorded here in 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 55. And as we start to read this, you will quickly note who we're talking about. 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 55. If you have it, it reads, "At the moment that Saul saw David go out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, the chief of the army, 'Whose son is this boy, Abner?' Abner replied, 'As surely as you live, O king, I do not know.'" Now the Watchtower states that Saul was not just interested in knowing the name of David's father, but rather he wanted to know what kind of man raised such a boy with great faith and courage. A young person who was willing not only to face but to defeat the giant Goliath. We can conclude by his question that Saul was intending to find out David's background, his family's reputation. Now, not only did David bring praise to his family, he brought praise to God. He brought praise to Jehovah. So what's the point? Well, you young ones, you dear young brothers and sisters, We know that you too can bring praise to our God, to your family, to the congregation by your conduct, by having a good name. Now we know you, dear young ones, are constantly facing challenges in this wicked world, no matter where you go. Schools are saturated with people who challenge us or try to entice us to do things that will draw us away from Jehovah and hence make ourselves a bad name. And maybe since the lockdown of COVID-19, you may find yourself spending more time at home. But we also need to be careful because now we may be finding ourselves using more internet, more social media, or maybe even engaging in more entertainment. We want to make sure that our conduct is one that brings us praise to Jehovah. Allow your conduct, your name, to permit you to make Jehovah proud like David did. Set your eyes on spiritual goals like Daphne Jane did. You can set goals like pioneering, or maybe serving where the need is greater, or maybe even applying to serve at Bethel or to help with theocratic construction projects, or maybe even applying to the school for kingdom evangelizers. And for you young brothers, reaching out for privileges like becoming a ministerial servant. It's never too early. Did you know that the Bible mentions that Timothy was a young man when he was appointed as a ministerial servant? Perhaps in his late teens or around 20 years old. There is so much we can do in Jehovah's service that will contribute to making ourselves a good name. And we encourage you, dear young ones, to keep striving after spiritual things. Now, what can we say about our dear Christian sisters? Well, sisters, you too can bring praise to Jehovah and the congregation, your family, and Jehovah through your actions and your fine reputation. You sisters are in the forefront of the preaching work. It's as the Bible states, you are a large army. And because of that, you are noticed more than the smaller army of men, hence giving you a greater opportunity to display how your good name positively reflects on God and others. This was impressed on me not so long ago, before the coronavirus pandemic, when I was able to visit a theocratic construction project, and I noticed that the majority of the volunteers were sisters. In fact, the brothers told me 75% of the volunteers were sisters. But the truth is, this is the case in most fronts. When we go to our field service groups, who are the majority there? Our sisters. When we're cleaning the Kingdom Hall, who are the majority? Our sisters are. Or when we're cleaning the Assembly Hall, who are the majority? Our sisters. In fact, even those who volunteer to commute to Bethel, the majority are sisters. Now, the brothers also are involved and have a full share, but you sisters are by far the majority, and you are to be commended for that. Now, what if you have a family and you're not able to do as much as you would like? Does that mean you're not making a good name for yourself? Not at all. Interestingly, in Proverbs chapter 31, when the Bible speaks of the capable wife, it mentions that this woman who cares for her family is declared happy and is praised for her exemplary conduct. Well, we know you sisters care for your children, your grandchildren. You manage a home. You make sure everyone in your family has everything they need while still having a full share in the ministry. Your work has not gone unnoticed, and it is very much appreciated, and we warmly commend you for all you do, sisters. In fact, it brings to mind what the Apostle Paul listed as some of the qualities that mature Christian sisters would have that are making a good name for themselves. Note what he said here to Titus in chapter 2. Titus chapter 2, verses 3 to 5. Titus chapter 2, verses 3 to 5. If you have it, it reads, "Likewise, let the older women be reverent in behavior, not slanderous, not enslaved to a lot of wine, teachers of what is good, so that they may advise the younger women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be sound in mind, chaste, working at home, good, subjecting themselves to their own husbands, so that the word of God may not be spoken of abusively. In other words, the Apostle Paul outlines some beautiful qualities that mature Christian sisters would have that are making themselves a good name with God. By these qualities, not only are you making yourself a good name through your conduct, but you bring praise to your family, to the congregation, and to our Creator Jehovah. Now, a good name is also important and necessary for the men of the congregation. So much so that without a good reputation, a brother would not be able to serve as an elder or a ministerial servant. It is a biblical requirement. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2, 7, and 10, it states that the men that take the lead in the congregation must be irreprehensible. They must have fine testimony, or as the footnote says, have a good reputation. They must be without reproach, and they must be free from accusation. When the friends hear the names of these fine men, they ought to think of someone who lives by Christian standards in every aspect of their life. They would never think of someone who's lazy, or one who's involved in questionable business, or one who has a violent temper or disgusting speech. There is no place for this type of man among those that take the lead in the congregation. Therefore, we commend you brothers, all you brothers that do everything you can to make yourselves a good name. And for those of you that are reaching out for more responsibility, this proves that you're also making an effort to make yourself a good name in the congregation and with our God. The men, the women, and the young ones who are striving to make themselves a good name or a good reputation are also making themselves a good name with Jehovah. Now, this takes us to the third question that we asked at the beginning. Is it really necessary or important to make ourselves a good name with God? Well, if fewer things in this world interest most people more than their names or their reputation, then the most important thing in our lives should be making ourselves a good name with God. This is far more important than enjoying the temporary glory or fame or admiration of our neighbors, our workmates, our schoolmates, our family members, or the world in general. Jesus set a perfect example for us in this regard. His life course not only demonstrated the importance of having a good name with God, but it also showed us the benefits of doing so. Jesus' whole life was centered on glorifying and being loyal to his Father. Jesus never allowed for his personal name or his reputation, his desires, or his career to be the primary focus of his life. If Jesus' life course did not make that abundantly apparent to us, undoubtedly his words on his last night on earth did. Note what he said here in Luke chapter 22 and verse 42. And these were only just a few hours before his death. Luke chapter 22 and verse 42. Jesus speaking here says, Father, if you want to, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, let not my will, but yours take place. Although distressed, anguished, and agonizing, Jesus did not think about himself. Jesus was tortured by the thoughts of how his death as a supposed evildoer might negatively reflect on his Father's reputation. That's why he prayed, please remove this cup from me. However, he went on to say, nevertheless, let not my will, but your will take place. This was in a very literal sense, a self-sacrificing spirit that Jesus displayed. Jesus was willing to make a good name with God no matter the outcome. Although Jehovah allowed Jesus to be tested to the point of death, he did not forget Jesus. Jehovah resurrected Jesus and rewarded him richly. One of the things that Jehovah gave his son was one of the most precious gifts a father could ever give their child, his approval. But Jehovah went beyond that. According to Philippians chapter 2 and verse 9, Jehovah exalted him to a superior position and gave him a name that's greater than any other name. So yes, Jesus made a good, an excellent, a delightful name with God. Now we need to follow Jesus' example. It's imperative that we make ourselves a good name with Jehovah. Jehovah has promised to reward all of those that make themselves a good name with him with perfect life on a paradise earth. So is it important for you and I to have a good name with God? I would say so. It's vital. Our eternal lives depend on it. While this world buries itself deeper and deeper into a decadent course of debauchery with its loose conduct, its abhorrent speech, and its satanic thinking, we need to loyally stand with Jehovah and Jesus. Although more and more people seem to lack respect for God or even question his existence, we would never hide the fact that we are Jehovah's Witnesses. We proudly stand with our God, knowing that he will richly reward us very soon if we make ourselves a good name with him. That reward in form of life on a paradise earth forever in perfection is obtainable to all that make themselves a good name, all who have a reputation that pleases God. Even though Jehovah has a perfect memory, he has been writing the names of these individuals in what Revelation chapter 17 verse 8 calls the scroll of life. A symbolic scroll with names of those who have exercised faith, who have pursued righteousness, integrity keepers that have made themselves a good name with God, and hence he considers worthy of eternal life. So just think about this for a second. If Jehovah took the time to write the names of faithful men and women of old in his word, the Bible, what will he do with faithful men and women, faithful integrity keepers that live in the last days and are loyal to him? He'll also write their name down, but not in the Bible, in his book of life, in the scroll of life. Now, can you and I look for our names to be written in that scroll? Absolutely. But friends, all we need to do is put God's will first in our life. Now, this is not something we should try to do occasionally or when convenient. No, making a good name with God should be a daily deed. If we cease to do Jehovah's will, or if we fail to be faithful integrity keepers, then our names could be erased or removed from the book of life. Therefore, can you now see the importance of your name or your reputation? You and I have the privilege of finding our names to be written in God's book of life, but we also want to strive that it remain there permanently. This involves our whole way of life, our personality traits, our habits, as well as our service to Jehovah. So whether others are aware or not of what you do, Jehovah sees you. He knows who you are. He knows you by name, and he sees every act of faithfulness. And we can be sure, as one brother said, that no one engages in an act of faithfulness toward God that does not receive a blessing, a reward. And the blessing always outweighs the sacrifice we make. So whether you're aging, whether you're young, whether you're a man or a woman, let us all strive to have our names inscribed and remain in Jehovah's scroll of life. Now, do you remember that check that we discussed in the beginning, that faulty $1 million check? Well, as we can see in the next slide, or next picture here, your name can gain you much more than $1 million. Your name can gain you eternal life, as noted on this check. Why? Well, it's not because you're a good person, but because you have proven to be a faithful servant of Jehovah. Unlike the first check, this check is signed, and considering that Jehovah's name is on it, this check is going to be cashed. We can make sure it will not bounce. It is backed and signed by the most powerful being in the universe. Jehovah's name is our guarantee. So friends, all we need to do is make sure that our name is written not on the figurative check, but in the scroll of life, in Jehovah's book of life. And the only way we can do this is by making ourselves a good name with our Creator, our Father, our God, Jehovah.